Fox News is America's election headquarters, and it's down to the wire for Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders in Iowa. The latest Quinnipiac poll shows Senator Sanders with the edge over Clinton. Compare that with the latest Fox News poll out of Iowa, which has Mrs. Clinton leading by 6 points. Both polls make it clear this is a very tight race, and ground game is going to be key. Bernard Whitman was a pollster for former President Bill Clinton and is CEO of Whitman Insight Strategies. Kevin Mccullough is a talk show host for Salem Media Group. Bernard, maybe you can speak first to the idea of polling Iowa. How difficult is it?
It's incredibly difficult. Here's why. Number one, Iowans are notorious for deciding extremely late. So even polls that you do a week before may not show exactly what's going to happen. Two, we have to remember this is a caucus. It's not a primary. To actually participate in a caucus requires a huge amount of dedication. You have to spend hours sitting in the living room, listening to debates. You have to publicly stand up, declare your allegiance, and you might have to go through several rounds in a caucus, less likely in this case because there's only 3 candidates. So it's a big effort. And deciding who is actually going to come out and vote has always been the challenge for pollsters. Now, if you actually look underneath those numbers, there is an edge for Hillary. Why? Because the people who are most likely to vote in caucuses are the people who have voted in caucuses before. If you look at 2008 caucus goers, she's ahead by some polls 55 to 38.
But Bernie Sanders is the guy, Kevin, bringing all this enthusiasm to the Democratic side of the political election this year.
Well, certainly passion has a lot to do with what Iowa ends up being about. And she was also leading in 2008 when she supposedly had the right demographics, and somebody came from 3rd place to win. His name was Barack Obama. And very similar kind of message, completely different vehicle. You know, the president and Senator Sanders couldn't be more different in terms of personality and even what they appear. But the idea is that there's a message that he has captured that seems to be in that younger demographic that wants to make a difference in the world around him. That's kind of their guy.
But is it possible, Bernard, that all of this enthusiasm that Bernie Sanders has been generating at these big events with thousands of people, if he carries that into Iowa, I mean, there could be a bunch of first-time caucus goers that, you know, haven't been seen before.
Absolutely the case. I think it's anyone's guess. Monday is going to be a very exciting night because we really aren't going to know. Here's another challenge for Bernie. His base, his strongest supporters happen to be young, white, liberal men who also happen to be the demographic that's the least likely to vote. We all know older people more likely to vote. If you look at 2012, under half of those under 30 actually showed up to the polls. 3/4 of people over 65 showed up. So older voters more likely to vote, less likely to support Bernie. But at the end of the day, he very well might be able to edge Hillary out.
Throw out 2012 because Obama was an incumbent. Really, 2008's the better analogy. And I really do think that, I'm not saying it's a shoo-in, but you heard Senator Sanders say on the heels of the White House just a second ago, we're expecting a big turnout. If they're upwards of 250, 280,000 for the Democrats for that night, I think you're looking at a Sanders upset.
He also answered the question a lot of people have been asking him about a possible endorsement from the president. It seemed like President Obama sort of gave an almost endorsement of his former Secretary of State earlier in the week. Here's what Bernie Sanders had to say about that.
What the president has tried to do, what Vice President Biden has tried to do, is to be as even-handed as they can be. And I know there was some discussion the other day about a Politico interview where he was tipping the scale towards Secretary Clinton. I don't believe that at all. I think he and the Vice President have tried to be fair and even-handed in the process, and I expect they will continue to do that.
If he were to win Iowa and then go on to win New Hampshire, where he's way ahead, Bernard, what does that do to Hillary's campaign?
I think all it does is put the focus on South Carolina, Nevada, and Super Tuesday. I mean, the fact is, what does President Obama care most about? Electing a Democrat in November. And you could ask just about anybody except hardcore Bernie Sanders supporters, the person who is most likely to be able to capture the White House is not Bernie Sanders, it's Hillary Clinton.
Your assessment,
It'll
Kevin?
be interesting to see. I think ideologically, President Obama finds himself distinctively in Bernie Sanders' camp. He's got to play the chairman of the party and be fair to everybody, so he's kind of in a tough position. But I think if you're talking about real ideology, I think he's a Sanders guy.
But sticking with you for the moment, if Hillary loses Iowa and New Hampshire,
I think she's in deep trouble. I think it's 2008 all over again.
Really?
Yeah.
Your assessment?
No, I actually disagree. In fact, I think, obviously, I think Hillary Clinton probably will not win New Hampshire. New Hampshire is basically a suburb of Vermont. I think their campaign has been thinking that all along. I think they've been calculating. They hope that they do capture Iowa, but it could easily go to Bernie Sanders. They've built a pretty strong depth of support, a ground game in South Carolina and Nevada. I think that Bernie's message resonates much less in the South. And if you look at all the national polling, Hillary is still way ahead. So if he does capture those two early contests, could that margin shrink? Absolutely. But I think ultimately Hillary will be the nominee.
If they split, I think that advantage Hillary. If they split Iowa, New Hampshire, if he wins both, and in some style convincing, he's got a caucus strategy the way Obama did. His ground game is built around caucuses and winning in the states that Democrats don't normally compete in. He could run up to an early lead.
Kevin McCullough, Bernard Whitman, thank you.
Thank you, John.